Welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the place where you can learn how to create a dental practice and a business life that you love. Listen in with Dr. David Moffet as he interviews successful entrepreneurs and successful business people and successful dentists as they share their business successes, their stories, and their breakthrough ideas. Sharing pearls of wisdom that you can take back to your practice and implement immediately so that you can have that great practice with more patients, higher profits, and less stress. This is the podcast where great dental practices meet with successful business processes. Thanks for tuning in to the Ultimate Dental Podcast, the podcast where thought leaders, industry experts, and thriving practice owners reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies that will help you to grow your dental practice faster. Now, here's your host, Dr. David Moffet.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. David Moffet. I'm here in Burrawang in New South Wales, which is about 2 hours southwest of Sydney. And today it gives me great pleasure to be talking to somebody in the same time zone as me. I've got Dr. Mark Hassard down in Fitzroy in Victoria, in Melbourne. Mark, welcome to the Ultimate Dental Podcast. Good to see you again.
Yeah. Hi, David, and thanks for having me. I've looked forward to have a conversation with you again, so it should be great.
No, it'd be good. Mark, now, I still remember receiving an email from you over, it was a weekend. I know exactly where I was and sitting on my computer, and this email came in. I think it was 2000, and your email read, look, I'm looking at forming a group of dentists, high productive dentists, in a similar manner to the way that the real estate agents have a $1 million round table. I thought, well, that's a fascinating idea. And you said that you had a good collection of Victorian dentists, but nobody in New South Wales. So I was kind of able to slot in a few New South Welshmen. And that meeting, I think, ended up being start of November 2000 and ran for many years on an annual basis. And for a lot of those members, and me included, that concept of that exceptional practice group, as it was called, really helped to give my practice another boost in terms of what it was doing and how it grew. But thank you for that, and thank you for entering my life with a positive impression right from the start. Where did that concept come along from? Because when I met you at that event, there seemed to be, as I just said, there seemed to be a good selection of Victorians who were already enjoying this camaraderie that the group then offered to dentists around Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, well, I've always said that one of the best things you can do in your career is develop a support group around you. You need some people who are on your side and pulling in the same direction as you are. And I mean, so often you'd go to an ADA group meeting or something, and it was sort of like you were afraid to talk because you knew someone was going to shoot you down, or that, it wasn't going to be well received. I can still remember the first ADA group meeting I ever went to as a young dentist. And at that stage, I was just starting to piece my practice together, how I worked. And I'd learned something that day about how to, bump my efficiency up a bit. And anyway, I shared it with a group of guys who were standing there talking, and it was like I just farted, like the looks on their faces of horror that this guy would be talking about how to run your practice more efficiently. So that stuck with me. So I managed to form a small group. We were 3MP group. There was Mike, Mark, and Paul. And so we'd formed this small group. But then I thought, wouldn't it be nice if we drew together dentists from all around Australia, like different experiences. And the thing is, if you were in Parramatta and I'm in Canterbury, we're not competitors. We can actually share what works and what we like and what goes well. So, I mean, I really think every young dentist should be looking for a group of like-minded people who you can trust, who you can talk to, who can help bring you on in your career. I think that's such a good thing to have.
Yeah, I was fascinated. I think there was 25 or 30 dentists there, and over the course of the 2 days we went around the table and people were giving their 3 tips. What surprised me dramatically was that the guy I was sitting next to, who I didn't know, I had never heard of or met, was taking copious notes from everybody. Everybody had ideas that he was writing down dramatically. And then towards the end of the event, you asked the dentists to share what their turnovers were. Most of them were doing under $1 million a year back in 2002. And I know that I was doing 1.2 million, and I thought that was pretty good. And then the guy next to me said he was doing 3 million. And it was just everybody's jaw in the whole room just hit the table. Everybody's jaw just dropped. It was like what they call a mic drop now. It was just a collective jaw drop. And I was surprised at how somebody who was doing so well was still eager to learn. And so that was, I guess, a lesson which we all know. I think it's John Wooden who says, when you're through learning, you're through. And he was a basketball coach, I believe.
Coach Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
There you go. And he certainly was. He's certainly full of wisdom, Wooden. But this guy, obviously was keen to learn. And I thought, well, we can all just keep learning from that. And so that I always looked forward to those annual meetings of the Exceptional Practice Group, and went around the country, went to Brisbane and the Gold Coast and Sydney and Adelaide.
Yeah,
all very exciting. But it was a great concept. So thank you for doing that, because you certainly gave a lot of dentists that extra spurt. The top of the mountain's very narrow, and so when you get up there's not much room for many others, but there's plenty of mountains, and there's plenty of people sitting on the top of their own mountain, and they don't know who to talk to, as you said. And you're right. I remember going to my first dental meeting, and my boss said, when you go, don't tell them anything. Just say, yeah, things are going okay. Like the old Tom Hopkins, unbelievable. How are your patients? Oh, they're unbelievable. All that sort of stuff. But it was a great concept, and obviously it had been working for you in a smaller scale with the 3 M's and a P, and then it was able to be shared by the newer people, and we made some good friends out of that group for sure.
Yeah, definitely did. Our old friend Omar Reed used to say about the average dentist, if you asked them to form a firing squad, they'd form in a circle. And the intent of that EPG group was to be the opposite of that, to be have a group of people together who are really, pulling for each other and wanting the best for each other. And I think we actually did achieve that. And so many people, actually, you're not the only one, have said that it really changed their career. So I'm very grateful that a lot of people found it that way.
Yeah, no, it was good. Now, one of those trips, I don't know whether it was the first one or a subsequent trip to Melbourne, you actually took us out to your practice as well, you had just started a new location. And that was quite exciting to see a practice built from the ground up, because for me, I bought a practice and then had to adapt it. I wasn't keen to buy a practice, open the doors and hope people would find me. My philosophy was there's always somebody who's got a filing cabinet full of dentistry that needs to be done that they haven't done or they haven't addressed with their patients, and it worked for me. But your practice was, again, an initiative. Now, you bought the building too, didn't you?
Yes, bought the building, and I wanted to work within walking distance of home. So that was none of the practices nearby were for sale. And the thing is, is a very heavily dentisted area. There's lots of good practices all around. So yeah, it was a really interesting experience to set up a new practice. But anyway, in month number 1, with starting from a base of 0 patients, we made a profit, and then we made a profit every subsequent month. So it was it worked really well. But I can still remember walking from door to door amongst local businesses, handing out business cards and talking and, having a coffee with people and all that sort of stuff, which you do because you've got so much time. And of course, you've got 2 staff members sitting there, waiting, one to answer the phone, one to keep the place clean. And I'm out trying to drum up business. So, it was a fun time, and so many people said we were going to fail, but it just took off like that. So it was great.
Yeah, well, I think that was also the time when there was less dentists around than there are now. Of course, subsequent to that, I think around 2010, 2012, the government started paying dentists to set up in rural areas where there was where there was less dentists sadly, the government was paying more than one dentist to set up in the same rural town, sometimes 2 or 3 in new suburbs as well. They thought, I'm going to be the only dentist here, and all of a sudden 2 others pop up with the same check from the government to help them set up. So it was a good time to do it. But Mark, you also, I think, built that practice, and then you were able to sell and retire from being a wet-fingered dentist as we at a very early age, in your 50s, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, 59.
There you go.
Yeah, but I mean, by that stage, I'd been doing dentistry for 34 years, so that's enough. And I always say to people, there's only 2 reasons you would work. One is you need the money, or the second thing is you love it. And after 34 years, the gloss had gone off. Like I'd done enough crown preps and enough this and that and the other thing that the gloss had gone off as far as loving it. And things had gone so well financially, I thought, well, why not? I mean, you're never going to be fitter. Every year's worse than the last as you get older. So you're never going to be fitter. Why not retire when you're relatively young, fit, strong, and all that, and enjoy, what you want to do?
No,
Yeah, that's what I did.
very, very good philosophy, rather than retire because you're worn out and you feel like you need to. The other thing too is that longer people go on in their practices, and you've seen this too, their practices tend to run themselves down, and then the
Yes.
value of the practice isn't there to sell as an asset. But it shouldn't really be like that anyway. You should be able to put enough money away that if you can't sell it, you can just work for another year and take the money from that, and that's the equivalent of the sale price, and then just close the door. But for you, of course, selling a dental practice in a building that you own, then you've got a tenant for it straight away. That's really, really important.
Yeah, well, one of the things I always said was I would like to be able to, on the final day in practice, as I'm walking home, take the keys to the practice and throw them in the lake, and if I'd set things up financially right, I should be able to do that. And I could have done that, but as it happened, I had somebody who bought the practice and ran it very successfully from then on. So it all went well. But yeah, I think too many dentists aren't smart enough with how they manage their finances, especially early in their career. And, early is when you set that groundwork for what's to come later. And if you can make a few smart decisions right early in your career, you can really set yourself up financially. And one of the biggest influences I ever had in the financial area was a group called Whitehall Management, Greg Stanley. Now, I know Whitehall Management still exists, but I don't know whether Greg Stanley, but I've done over the years, I've done hundreds of courses, but I can still remember going to the Regent Hotel, as it was then called. It's now the Sofitel, and attending a course with Greg Stanley in May 1986.
Right.
Most courses I've ever done have vanished into the mists of time, but I still remember that one. And that was the one that set me up financially for the rest of my life, really.
Well, similar to you, I've had a good accountant who's set me up with a self-managed super fund and had me investing as much as I was entitled to, with the tax advantages in super, and then managing that myself, and just got a couple of I was fortunate to get a couple of good tips, and the market was rebounding from 87 I bought my practice at the start of 87. So I really started investing in myself into my retirement in the 90s. So, but a lot of people leave it too late. That concept of letting a practice run down. The other thing that scared me, Mark, and I acquired other practices and merged them into mine. I did go to look at a practice for sale. A dentist friend of mine who had dropped dead at the age of 58, actually in his practice at lunchtime, he had a little bed in his practice where he used to have a nap, and he went and had a nap, and he had a cerebral aneurysm and never woke up at 58. And I went and looked at his practice. His wife was selling it, and it was like, the TV show The Price is Right, that little mountaineer going down the mountain as the value of the practice was diminishing by every second that I was talking to her. And I thought, I can't do that to my family. I've got to also get the asset of my dental practice away from being a dental practice and into family funds and sell the practice. And so I was always looking for the opportunity to sell. But as you know, it's very hard to sell a very successful practice because there's not many people out there who can do it. And if they can do it, they don't need to buy your practice. They can do it themselves, as you showed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was lucky. I did get a fellow who was returning back to Australia, having spent a few years overseas in England. And so, and I really, from his point of view, whatever he paid me, it was worth it, because he hit the ground running, and he was just, I spoke to him a few months later, and he said, I'm just snowed under. I've got so much work, I don't know what to do with it. So, I mean, it was worth it from his point of view, but also it was worth it from my point of view. Fortunately, he had really good income protection insurance, because he ended up falling off a ladder and had to then on-sell the practice to somebody else, who then ran it down. I see so many dentists, they love this idea. They've got a main practice. Oh, I'm going to expand. I'll buy a hobby practice over here. And what always ends up happening, at least in my observation, maybe there are some very talented managerial dentists, but it always ends up the other one becomes a distraction for them, and it runs down. And I had fellow who bought the practice after the successful one, and he just ran it into the ground. And fortunately, I mean, I was completely out the door, had nothing to do with because it would have broken my heart to see such a beautiful practice destroyed, but that's what happened.
Well, my wife, Jane, is similar with homes. She says once she sold the home, she never drives past it again to see what it looks like, though the people who bought our Sydney home 8 years ago wanted to friend me, and I said, I can't do that. It's kind of like kind of like your father dies and then your mother remarries, and he wants to tell you all the things that he's doing with your mum that your father should be doing. It's a little bit like that. I understand, you want to just cut, just wait for the rent check to come in, and that's all you need to do. Now, since retirement, Mark, you've made yourself a very good name in Australia in dentistry as a case acceptance expert, teaching dentists how to improve their case acceptance presentations, as well as teaching dentists on better practice efficiency as well. Let's unpack each of those boxes and how you decided to do that and how you found the audience and the responses from the audience.
Yeah, well, how I got into it first was when I retired, one of the corporates said to me, would I like to go round? And they had a number of underperforming practitioners. So in a corporate, they might have 200 dental practitioners, and they know from the figures what certain people should be producing in a given practice with a certain number of new patients. And so they had a number of underperforming practitioners. And they said to me, would you just go around and watch them work and try and find out what's going on, like why they're underperforming? So I'd get to fly up to the Gold Coast or Adelaide or wherever. And I'd just sit in the corner, and the dentist would say, I've got a colleague visiting from Melbourne. Do you mind if they watch? And, the patients would always say, no, that's fine. So I'd just sit in the corner and watch the practitioner work. And I found a few who technically weren't so great. But the main thing I found was the underperforming practitioners had a problem with communicating. They just couldn't explain treatment clearly and well, in a way patients could accept. And so I thought to myself, well, there's an opening. That's really the key to success, really, in practice, this ability to explain treatment to patients. So I don't think naturally I had that skill, but I'd realized early on in my career how crucial it was. And I'd spent a lot of time developing that skill. I mean, I'd flown to Utah to sit and watch seminars on communication. I'd flown to Phoenix, flown to Sydney or Brisbane or wherever there was like these were sales seminars, but we in dentistry, we call it communication. But I thought to myself, there's the key to success. And I mean, one of my early mentors was LD Pankey. I followed the Pankey Institute, and I visited the Pankey Institute. And there you had a guy who technically was the most accomplished dentist going around. I mean, he was an absolute master. But even he said the key to success in practice is your ability to communicate. So that was my passion. That was my interest. And then since then, I've found a lot of other dentists who, need help in that. And so I got into running courses and, online courses and things like that. And it's been a real enjoyment to sort of be able to share that information with a wide variety of dentists.
Do you find that, and I found this with my customer service courses, is that people come along and they take notes and then they go home and put their notes on a shelf and then they never use them and never read them again. And I just and even clinical courses. I've got clients who I met at clinical courses years ago who aren't doing the things that I learned and used at those clinical courses. And of course, it kind of frustrates me to think that they were there and they've just done nothing with it. Did you find that with your communications courses?
Well, early on, I did do a little bit of mentoring. So, I'd go in, I'd visit someone, I'd find out what the problems were, and then I followed up with them every month for several months. And I actually found it was so frustrating because you would know what they needed to do, but you just couldn't get them to do it. Like there was one guy I remember particularly, he was not diagnosing any periodontal disease, and that's going to be a big problem. That's the sort of thing that if you don't die, that's going to come back to bite you. But he didn't use a perio probe. He didn't even look, he was just looking for holes, right? So I said, we need to start diagnosing periodontal disease. So my task for the month was, just want you to, every patient, just do a periodontal screening exam. Just measure the mesiobuccal of every tooth, and that'll give you an overall feel. I was hoping to introduce him to this concept. And month number 1, I went back and said, now, how are you going with the periodontal? Oh, yeah, I haven't managed to find any perio probes in the practice. So I rang up the boss. I said, are your perio probes in the practice? He says, yeah, we've got stacks of the things. So month or two, I went back. Have you done any perio? And oh, no, I forgot to get the perio probes out, And at that stage, I realized I wasn't cut out to do mentoring. I mean, if it had kept going, I might have ended up screaming at the guy. So my attitude is this, that when people come to see me, I give them the absolute best information that I've got, like I'm giving them the real stuff, the stuff that I used for 34 years and that I know that works. But whether they go back to their practice and use it or not, that's really on them. That's on them. But the ones who do use it, it can really change their lives. I remember the first time I ever ran the communication course, it was in Sydney. The place just near where they've got the hotel just near, it's not quite at the Rocks. It's down the bottom of George Street, but not quite to the Rocks. And anyway, in that hotel, we had a guy flew up from Tasmania to take the course. So I thought, fantastic. And this guy was doing about 2 or 3 crowns a month. So anyway, he took really good notes, went back to his practice, and he rang me up the first night back, after his first day back at work. He said, guess what? I just got acceptance for 7 crowns today. So he's gone from 2 or 3 in a month to getting acceptance for 7 in one day. And how good's that? But I can't, like if somebody's not going to take the stuff and use it. One thing I do, which I found helped, was at the end of every seminar I run, I sit there with the people and I say, okay, guys, during this seminar, you've received over 200 ideas. I've counted them up, so there's over 200 concepts they've got during the seminar. I said, just pick 3 of them. So I remind them what we've talked about over the course of the day. I said, just pick 3 of them and implement those on Monday. Because I know if you try and implement 200 ideas, nothing will get done, right? So I just want you to pick 3. And then I go around the room and I ask each person, what are the 3 things you're going to do on Monday morning? And, you get the 3. So they've got it written down. They've all said the commitment in front of all their peers and the group there. That's fingers crossed that they actually go back and do those 3 things. But I mean, even if it's only 3 things, it'll be a start.
I think there is a concept that 3 is the number that the human mind can only manage. We talk in 3s: 3 wise men, 3 blind mice, 3 little pigs. Everything is in 3. So as soon as you start doing 4s or 6 or 8, the 5 S's and the 7 I's, you just confuse people.
Yeah.
I think it was Dan Kennedy who said that his job was to educate people when they saw him and sell them something that they could at least put in their play in their car, though now it's harder, the CDs or cassettes back in the day, that they could at least walk out with. And if they did a presentation where they had to order it, his job was done if they got it home. He said, but I can't get them to open the shrink wrap that it comes in. He said, that's their job. You've got it there. And I can remember actually at this place, I'd bought so much stuff from Dan Kennedy online, and I thought, I haven't opened all this stuff. And I just laid it out on the kitchen table and just opened it all up. And there was months of stuff. And I thought, I do feel powerful owning it, but I feel much more powerful listening to it. And
Nice.
that's the thing. You've got to put those. You've paid for the course, and you've got to put that in action, and then you've got to keep yourself accountable, or get somebody else to keep you accountable that you're
Yeah,
actually using it and improving on it. But we know
yeah,
it works. If it works for you when you did it, and it works for people that you've taught, then it should work for everybody.
yeah, yeah. I can still remember when I bought my first practice, and it needed a bit of painting, a bit of sprucing up. So I was actually on the paintbrush, painting the walls. This is sort of, nowadays I'd employ a painter, but back then I was on the paintbrush, but I was listening to Oma Reed, and Nadine Lindsay had put together an 8-cassette collection of Oma Reed's Napili 1, which was his basic communication course. And I just listened to it over and over and over, just went through it, and then I started again, listened to it right through. And I could practically say the words as Oma was saying them, but it was so useful. Actually, when you reminded me, I had another really nice story about a guy who actually took what I said and put it into practice. I had a dentist who'd been a dentist for 40 years, and he came to the communication seminar. And I mean, that's a long while to be a dentist, and he was still practicing, still a very competent dentist. But in his entire career, he'd never done a full mouth case, not a single full mouth case. He'd done quadrants or sextants, or and he could do implants and the whole thing, but he'd never done a full mouth. And as part of what I do in the second half of the day, I show people how to present a full mouth case. So I said this, and the guy, he's like, his eyes, like this, and he's taking all the notes and all the notes. So anyway, he rang me up after the first month back in his practice, and he said, guess what? I'm now doing 3 full mouth cases. But then he said, the scary thing is those cases have been there for my entire career. I just didn't know about it. If you think of a guy who's been doing 40 years of dentistry and picks up 3 full mouth cases in his month, what he could have done across the career. I mean, it's still great to pick up full mouth cases. Yeah, amazing stuff.
Well, I think often we get into our patients' wallets instead of just presenting to them what they need and let them decide whether it is for them or not. I had a patient who used to come and see me quarterly to have her teeth cleaned, and her mouth was spotless, but she did have very heavily restored teeth and crooked teeth. She was 2 or 3 years older than me. And one day she got up out of the chair at the end of her appointment, and she said, because I had pictures of full mouth smiles that I'd done as big canvases on the wall. She said, David, she said, do you think I could have dentistry done like that? And I had to apologise to her. I said, her name was Glenn, like Glenn Close. And I said, Glenn, I'm so sorry. I said, I just thought that this was something that you weren't interested in. And I remember when we did the preparations and then put the temporaries on, because the temporaries are the same as the finished job. And she was a theatre nurse, and she said to me when she came in, she said, "Yeah, I'm working with a mask on." And at the end of the operation, I pulled my mask down, and the doctor who there just went, "Wow, look at you!" And that was just with the temporaries on, and it was life changing for her. And so, I just used to tell my dentists and my clients, I said, you've got to diagnose as if either dentistry is free and they can get it done, or that they're a multimillionaire and they can get it done.
Yeah,
Or it's your mother and you're doing it as a gift for her because she deserves it. Those are the 3 options.
yeah.
And not to prejudge people.
Yeah, I mean, I think dentists have got a sort of moral right to show people the best that dentistry has to offer. I don't think it's like, I'll just do it when I think they might accept it or that. And so often I've been tricked by patients. Like I've had a patient drive up in a brand new 350S Mercedes, right? Brand new. He's just picked it up from the dealership. He had a broken tooth. He needed 1 crown, whatever it was, $50. He's just picked up the Mercedes. Now, when he drove it out of the showroom, he probably lost 60 grand in depreciation, right? So I say to him, oh, we just need to do a crown, say $1,800. Oh, I'd never spend that on a tooth, right? I'm like shocked. But then equally, I've had school teachers. I still remember this one lady, she drove up in a beaten up old Corolla, right? It would have been worth about $3,000, maybe. It had dents and it was just a beaten up old car. And Anyway, I looked around her mouth and it turned out she needed about $16,000 worth of dentistry. May have been 16, could have been 23. I don't remember the exact figure. But anyway, it was more than a little bit, you know. Anyway, I just told her about it and she says, yeah, let's do it, you know. And I'm just like, so the ultimate thing was her mouth was going to cost her about 5 times what her car was worth. But to her, it was worth it. And the end of the treatment, she said, I'm just so grateful. My whole life, I've had bad teeth. And then finally I've got them fixed up. And I said, that's fantastic. And I mean, I don't know where she got the money. She could have robbed a bank, you know. I mean, I don't know. But I mean, it's just, we just need to start showing patients the dentistry that they need, you know, and then let the chips fall where they may. I mean, I think of another guy, he came in and he looked like he'd been working under a truck doing truck repairs, you know, like he had the shorts on and the work boots and the you know, the T-shirt and all this, and he was a bit grubby and all this sort of stuff. And I had a look and it looked like he'd swallowed a hand grenade, right? It was like $50,000 worth of work, you know? And before I sit there and treatment plan a $50,000 case, which would take me quite a while, I don't want to spend all that time and then have him say, oh, no, I just want, you know, $1,000 worth or something. So anyway, I just sort of, after having a look around his mouth, I said to him, gee, you know, Bill, there's a lot going on in your mouth. I think you've got 2 options. One is we can just keep patching things up. Now that's quick and cheap, but the problem is your teeth are on this downward path. Or we can build everything up properly, you know, make your teeth back to the proper length, put some crowns on, replace the missing teeth, give you a night guard so you're not grinding your teeth away anymore. Now, I haven't worked it out exactly, but ballpark, we're talking about $50,000. Is that something you could afford, or is that just out of the question? And he sort of sat there for a moment. He said, yeah, I could do that. I said, okay. And yeah, it's just, we don't know how many cases we miss out because we just don't offer the good dentistry. It's amazing.
I remember towards the end of my career, I had a temporary hygienist come in to work with me. It was a he, and I'd always employed females, but he came from the agency. He was male. He is a very handsome man, very close cut beard, very fit man with a very strong accent, unlike any other hygienist I'd had. And he brought an iPad to work with Dr. DDS on it, I think it was called. And he was showing people perio and crowns, and he was getting patients that I'd been seeing for every 6 months and saying, yeah, everything's fine. He said, she's got some cracked teeth here. And I look and go, oh, yeah, she has too. And I remember one patient who could have done with a hair colour, she could have done with some makeup, she could have done with a new set of clothes because she wore the same clothes every 6 months. And I said, Cheryl, you need 3 crowns. We'll do 2 this year and 1 next year. So I'm straight into a wallet for her health fund, you know, so she gets the most bang. She goes, oh, I can't wait till next year for that 3rd crown. I want them all done now. And of course, you know. And in fact, even with Glenn had a crown. She had 2 missing premolars, and I remember doing a crown, and we spotted some decay. It was on the molar, and it was in what I call the saddle area between the buccal and the lingual, where the margin rides up away from the gum. And so I said, look, you really need a new crown, but because your rebates are all being used, we can do it next year. I can just do a little filling there. And she said, no, I can't. I won't be able to sleep, she said. She said, I won't be able to sleep thinking that you've got a patch in there. And so we replaced it then and there. But, you know, it's the same thing with prostate cancer. I know someone who had a prostate that was enlarged. He said he couldn't get, first 2 weeks he got no sleep. He just said to the doc, get it out.
Yeah.
I don't need it. Get it out.
Yeah, well, actually, one of the key phrases I say to dentists is you should diagnose the patient's teeth, not their wallet. Like, what's in their wallet is really none of your concern. You know, like, they may be rich, they may be poor. You're there to diagnose their teeth. And yeah, and the way I put it, you put it like if it's your mum in the chair. I always say to diagnose as if it's your best friend and they have lots of money. That's how I diagnose. It's my best friend in the whole world. What would I recommend for them?
Yeah, no, it has to be, and that's really, really important to have that philosophy. It's best treatment always. Bob Pick, did you ever come across Dr. Robert Pick on social media, or you might have removed?
No.
So he was in in Chicago. He passed away earlier this year, and he was on borrowed time, like 25 years borrowed time. He'd had a terminal cancer diagnosis with 6 months to live in 1998. And
Wow.
so he certainly toughed it out. But he said excellence and ethics always. That's how you practice. Always do the best for them and treat them ethically. And I think that's the most important thing. Let's talk about the practice efficiency seminars that you're doing, because again, there's a lot of money wasted by inefficient movement, inefficient storage, inefficient purchasing, all this sort of stuff. What are the gold nuggets that somebody watching this podcast or listening to this podcast can say, you know what, I haven't looked at that part of my practice for ages, and I'm sure I'm dropping a few hundred or maybe a few thousand or a few tens of thousands of dollars a year because of those inefficiencies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I could sum it all up, and I could probably give you the absolute guts of it in only a few minutes. Think about this. The only time you're creating or you're generating income is when the dentist is diagnosing and treating. That's it. Apart from that, everything else that occurs in the practice doesn't generate income. So when you're diagnosing and treating, that's it. But the thing with it is, I notice so many practices, because they're understaffed, under-equipped, under-resourced, the dentist is spending half their day or more filling in lab sheets and talking with referrers on the phone and walking patients out to the front desk and sitting there waiting while the room gets cleaned, and then waiting for the handpieces to come out of the sterilizer. So if my goal was always, I would spend 100% of my time diagnosing and treating. So when I was actually at my most efficient, I used to walk out of one operatory and a nurse had to meet me in the hallway, and she would say, "Mrs. Jones, surgery 215." And I would say, "Thank you very much." And I would disappear into surgery 2. Everything would be set up, 100% ready. I'd be underway. 30 or 40 minutes later, I'd walk out having done the preps and got the temporaries on. And then I'd be met in the hallway again, and they'd say, "Mr. Smith, surgery 1, or whatever it was." And so I was just spending all my time diagnosing and treating. And that's the real key to efficiency. I don't know how a dentist, for instance, for an example, can work out of one surgery. I mean, if you think about it, what's the minimum time it takes you to flip a surgery? That is from when one patient finishes a procedure until the surgery is totally clean and set up and ready to start the next procedure. I've been in practices, and I tell you, it's on average, it's about 12 minutes. So, and that's a practice that's operating I've seen ones where it's longer. I've seen one, but about 12 minutes to flip and reset from getting the person out, get everything reset, and the next patient sitting there. So if you think about it, if you're seeing 10 patients a day, that's 10 times 12, that's 2 hours a day where you're sort of just sitting there waiting for the surgery to be reset. Now, I didn't have 2 hours a day to waste. I just wanted to be in the office, work hard, go home. That's it. So, yeah, there it is in a nutshell. Give yourself the resources, the staff, the equipment, the space you need so that you can just spend all your time diagnosing and treating patients. Now, a guy I know really well, this is not just dentistry. A guy I know really well, he's a policeman, right? And you'd hope the policemen are out catching crooks, wouldn't you? But actually, at least in Victoria, I don't know how it is in New South Wales, but actually in Victoria, they spend at least half their time answering telephones and typing up reports and entering details into a computer and things like this, instead of being out doing what they're trained to do. So it runs across all sorts of professions.
Yeah, it's a nice analogy there about the police and having to do those reports, but you're absolutely right. It's getting those efficiencies and having people do the things so that you can do the dentistry. And it's the same. It's the same all over. The staff will say, "Why don't you make the appointments in your treatment room? What's the receptionist going to be doing while you're making the appointment in the treatment room? Then she's not going to be drilling teeth out at the reception desk or diagnosing." Yeah, that's the ridiculous part about it. And I always say, as far as I'm aware, no baby in the world has ever been born talking. So learning to talk is it's not a talent, it's a skill. that we learn. And so if we can, if everybody starts at zero and learns to talk, then we can teach them to talk just like us. And I think, I don't know whether you did any Dick Barnes courses, but my biggest shock was when Dick sold me another course and I went along and there was no Dick. It was some guy who worked for Dick, who wasn't a dentist, teaching me how to talk like Dick. And I'm going, how does this work? And it worked. And I thought, well, there you go. There's a lesson there. Get your team talking the same way. And I think I remember Jane telling me this. A patient came out and said, do I really need this crown? And Jane said, well, if you don't get a crown, the tooth's got a crack, a piece could break off, and you might have to have it extracted. And she goes, that's exactly what he said. And I said, that's what they all should say. Exactly what he said. And, everybody's got to drink from the same Kool-Aid, sing from the same hymn book, and that's the easy part. And the other thing is, no baby's ever been born with a telephone in its hand so they can learn telephone skills. Nobody's ever been born with a handpiece in its hand so they can learn how to drill teeth as well. Efficiency I came to a similar thought to you of working two rooms because, I was born with a disability. I was born left-handed, and so you can't employ a right-hander in a left-handed room. Heck, I know. I worked as a left-hander in right-handed room. So I just had to be very time efficient with my time. Go from this patient completed. I didn't need to sit there and put their coat on for them or take their bib off for them or vice versa. I went in the next room. There's a patient semi-reclined, bib on, injection being passed to me as we used to be able to do, as I'm walking in, to give the patient the injection. It's about time and motion, and it's not doing a filling 2 minutes quicker, because it's just about making sure that you're not sitting there watching people. I remember you told a story when you were doing a locum job. You thought, oh, I need to do a root canal, and you couldn't. The nurse disappeared, and when you went out, she was taking out one cotton ball at a time out of a drawer, and you've been waiting 5 minutes for her, or maybe longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, actually, one of the ways you can tell how efficient and how well integrated a team is by the amount they need to talk. And in my office, we used to do things exactly the same every time. So if we're doing one crown prep today, it'll be the same tomorrow, the same, so once we got in the routine, and so we'd be able to have a patient in there for, do a quadrant of crowns or whatever it is. And the patient would be amazed. She'd say, how's all this happening? All these instruments going everywhere and everyone's passing things, but you don't have to say anything. I'd say, well, that's the idea, but if you're constantly saying to the staff, well, could you go and get me the such and such, like I went in and I had actually a porcelain onlay done myself about a year ago. And the dentist was constantly saying to the nurse, would you pass me the retraction cord? Or could you hand me the such and such, and this was going on. And I thought to myself, that must drive him absolutely mad. But also he should work on the staff training so that everybody's on the same sheet, really. My rule in my office was I never did anything that could be delegated to a staff member. So I know some people ask me, do you walk people out to the front desk? And my answer is no, because that can be delegated to a staff member. Why would I walk them out to the front desk? Plus, the other thing, I walk out to the front desk, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start chatting to the patient, which will make everything grind to a halt out at the front desk. Or I'll walk out there to the waiting room, and a patient who I've just done 4 crowns on 2 weeks ago is going to say, hi, Mark. And then I'll have the embarrassing situation of not remembering their name and going, yes, hello. Yeah, I mean, the 2 topics I love in dentistry are communication and efficiency. I mean, I think of dentistry as almost like a 3-legged stool, rests on 3 things. The first thing is you need marketing to get patients in the door. You've got to create some perception in the mind of the public that says, I want to go to that dental practice, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing, once they're in the door, you need to explain the treatment to them in a way that they can understand and comprehend and then make a decision about. So that's the second leg. And the third leg of the tripod is once they've said yes to treatment, that is to then do the treatment as efficiently and time effectively as possible. I mean, I don't want to spit there and take a 90-minute crown prep, like I want to do that in half an hour or less and get on to the next patient. So there's my 3-legged tripod that supports a dental practice.
Yeah, you've got to be efficient. You've got to have a way of getting people come in. either by the fact that there's no other competition around. That's always one way. You don't need to market much there. And we all remember our friend in Kalgoorlie who, if anyone in Kalgoorlie needed an emergency appointment, he said, get on the plane and fly to Perth. he was so busy. That was interesting. But also, being able to present the treatment as it is. Mark, this has been a great old chat, and I'd like for anybody who's interested and wants to find out more, what's the best way for them to find out about your efficiency course and your case acceptance course, or just get in touch with you in general?
The best way is via my website, relaxeddentist.com. Dentist.com. So that just go to the website. You'll see information about I've got a couple of online courses they can do, one on communication, one on efficiency. But also, one of the things I really enjoy is just going out and visiting practices, doing talks. I can actually come to your practice and give a talk to the practice. Now, everybody gets the hours of CPD without having to fly somewhere or other. I'll come to you. That's the other thing. So the Relaxed Dentist. Yeah, and there's a contact page there. So if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask me, feel free.
All right, lovely. Well, Mark, it's been great catching up with you again. Thank you very much for your time this morning and being a guest on the Ultimate Dental Podcast. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you, David. Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of the Ultimate Dental Podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you for being part of our dental community and joining us each week on this incredible journey. If you found value in today's episode and you don't want to miss out on future episodes packed with expert insights and actionable strategies, here's how you can stay connected with us. Firstly, hit that subscribe button. Whether you're listening on your favourite podcast platform or watching on our website, subscribing ensures you'll never miss an episode. Secondly, share the love. If you know a fellow dentist or colleague who could benefit from the wisdom and knowledge that we share here, please share our podcast with them. Also, please share the podcast on your socials by simply clicking on the social icons wherever you view or listen to this podcast. Together, we can all do our bit to elevate the dental profession. And finally, stay engaged with us. We love hearing from you. Your questions, comments, and feedback fuel our mission to provide the best content for your professional growth, your personal growth, and for your practice growth. Remember, your journey to creating a dental practice and a business life that you love is our mission, and we're excited to be your trusted guide along the way. Thank you for being a part of the Ultimate Dental